more callers a chance to get on the call, so please don't hang up. We'll be starting here very, very shortly. This is a live call, and yes, this is really me. So we'll be getting started here in just a second. So please don't hang up. Thanks a lot. Well, good evening, folks. I'm Bill Johnson, and I'm honored to be your representative here in Congress. And I want you to know that I'm working hard to make our federal government in Washington more effective, more efficient, and most importantly, more accountable to you, the American people, because I know something that a lot of people in Washington seem to have forgotten, and that is that you, not Washington, should decide the path we take, the decisions that we make, and ultimately, you should be in charge of your health care decisions, not the federal government. Before I go any further, if you'd like to ask a question anytime during this call, just press 0, and it'll put you into the question queue, and you'll be able to ask your question, and then you'll be able to get right back into the call. Also, if you would like to subscribe to our email newsletter, please press 0 on your keypad to give me your email address, and that'll get you on our email mailing list. I want to thank you for joining me on this telephone town hall this evening. It's a real privilege for me to be able to speak with you about issues that mean the most to you. I'm not going to control the conversation, you are. We're just days away from hearing the fate of President Obama's takeover of health care. On Thursday morning, the Supreme Court will either strike down this disastrous law, uphold the law entirely, or strike down certain parts of the law. Now, we don't know what the Supreme Court's going to do. I don't have any inside information, but whatever the Supreme Court decides, this law must be repealed entirely and replaced with common sense solutions that put patients first. Again, if you want to ask a question, press 0 to get into the question queue. That'll get you into the queue. You can ask your question and get right back into the call. And if you'd like to subscribe to our email newsletter, just press 7 to give us your email address. President Obama's takeover of health care has proven to be nothing more than a series of broken promises covered up in empty political rhetoric. President Obama's health care law cut $500 billion from Medicare. That negatively affects approximately 36,000 seniors all along the Ohio River where we live. We were promised that this law would create jobs, but over 40% of America's small businesses are saying that this law is what's keeping them from growing and expanding their business and hiring more people. President Obama promised us that the law would lower cost, but we now know that it's going to cost America almost double what was promised, almost $2 trillion more than what the president promised. And finally, we were promised that Americans would be able to keep their doctors. But doctors themselves are already saying that this destructive law will limit access for Medicare patients. You've got 1 in 3 Medicare providers that are limiting the number of patients that they're taking. And so we've got some real concerns here. Again, if you'd like to ask a question, press 0 on your keypad. To ask a question, you'll get right back into the queue. There's no doubt in my mind, folks, that this law needs to be struck down and replaced while at the same time protecting America's seniors from devastating cuts to Medicare. And we'll talk about that as we get further into the call. This is just one of the issues that I think is important to you, but I'm sure that there are other issues on your mind as well. So we're going to get started here in just a second with the first question. But if you would like to ask a question, press 0 to get into the question queue. And you can also subscribe to our email newsletter by simply pressing 0 on your keypad. Press 7. Press 7 on your keypad and give us your email address. Hey, let me ask you a question before we start answering questions, and you can give me some feedback. Is this the first time that you've participated in one of our telephone town halls? like this one? If so, press 1 for yes, press 2 for no. Again, is this the first time that you've ever participated in one of these telephone town halls?
Good.
Like, press 1 for yes, press 2 for no. Let's go to our first caller, Evelyn.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hi, Evelyn. How are you?
I'm just fine. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. What's your question? What's on your mind, Evelyn?
Oh, they didn't tell you?
No, you get to ask your question. I want everyone to hear your question. You get to tell me what it is.
Okay. All right. Well, they asked me. Okay, never mind. What is your stance? What are you going to propose for this legislation? The Republicans, what are they going to propose?
Okay, well, let me outline it for you, because that's a very good question. The first thing that we're not going to do is that we're not going to try to pack a health care reform bill into a 3,000-page bill that everyone has to read before we find out what's in it, which is what Speaker Nancy Pelosi told us when the law was passed. Here's what we're proposing to do. First of all, there's some things within the health care bill, the health care law, that we think needs consideration of staying. Things like not allowing insurance companies to deny coverage because of pre-existing conditions. We think that's a good thing. It ought to stay. We also think in this kind of economy where 50% of America's college graduates are either unemployed or underemployed, it's also a good thing to let young people stay on their parents' health insurance policy until they're 26. It shouldn't be mandated, but it should be allowed. Here are some other things that we think need to be included in an overall health care reform law. Americans should be able to invest in health savings accounts with pre-tax dollars to enable them to pay for a lot of the routine health care at a cost much lower than paying for a massive health insurance policy. And they could even use some of that money out of that health insurance or health savings account to pay for a catastrophic policy that would handle things like cancers and heart attacks and those kinds of things. We'd also like to see tort reform, eliminating frivolous lawsuits so that doctors stay in the treatment rooms and the operating rooms rather than in the courtrooms, because that's driving practitioners out of the business as we see higher and higher and escalating malpractice insurance costs. And then finally, we want to put competition back into the system, making health care portable from state to state and job to job. Leading experts believe that if we do these kinds of things, we're going to put Americans back in charge of their health care decisions, keeping health care decisions between patients and their doctors, not an unelected panel of bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. So, Evelyn, I hope that answered your question. We definitely have a plan to reform health care to provide cost-affordable health care without cutting $500 billion, $500 billion out of Medicare, because that puts a lot of our seniors at risk of losing or seeing reductions in their Medicare benefits, and that's not what we want to support. Hey, again, let me ask you a question. Some of you are just now signing on to the call.